British neonatal nurse Lucy Letby is currently serving 15 life sentences for the murder of 7 infants and the attempted murder of 7 others. These convictions were secured despite a complete absence of direct forensic evidence. There were no eyewitnesses to the alleged harm, no CCTV footage of the incidents, and no physical forensic transfer connecting Letby to the infants' collapses. On July 3, 2018, police took the 28-year-old nurse into custody. This moment formally shifted the inquiry, making Letby the prime suspect in the investigation of the UK's most prolific modern child killer. Without a smoking gun, the prosecution's case relied on a synthesis of 2 pillars: circumstantial staffing patterns that placed Letby on shift during every incident, and highly specific post hoc medical interpretations of infant records. Today, a 14-member international panel of expert neonatologists is publicly challenging that framework. They argue that the medical data reflects institutional failures rather than deliberate acts of murder. The case forces a question about the legal threshold of beyond a reasonable doubt, specifically how the system handles criminal charges when the underlying medical data is fiercely contested by scientific peers. The investigation began at the Countess of Chester Hospital. Senior doctors demanded police intervention after identifying a statistical spike in infant mortality that reached nearly 3 times the facility's yearly average. This roster data formed the core of the prosecution's circumstantial case. By cross-referencing staff shifts with every infant collapse, investigators found that Letby was the sole overlapping variable, the only nurse present for every suspicious event. While presence does not prove action, this statistical clustering focused the entirety of the subsequent police investigation squarely on Letby. This scrutiny led to the discovery of psychological artifacts. Detectives found 250 confidential hospital handover notes stuffed inside shopping bags, alongside evidence that she had repeatedly searched for the victim's parents on social media. Among her papers were handwritten notes that the prosecution presented to the jury as a direct confession. The state focused heavily on specific scrawled phrases, "I am evil" and "I did this." Criminologists framed this behavior as a hero complex. They suggested she deliberately harmed fragile infants to become the center of attention during the resulting emergencies. These rosters and notes established a theory of opportunity and motive. To secure a murder conviction, however, the prosecution still had to prove a definitive medical mechanism of harm. The state relied on the post hoc medical review of Dr. Dewi Evans, a retired pediatrician, whose testimony became the foundation of the prosecution's medical case. Dr. Evans noted a specific clinical pattern. Infants who appeared stable and required low oxygen support were suffering sudden, catastrophic physiological collapses without any clear natural cause. After ruling out internal pathologies, Dr. Evans identified 2 deliberate mechanisms of harm. The first was the injection of air into an infant's bloodstream or stomach via syringe to create fatal embolisms. The second mechanism involved poisoning. Dr. Evans concluded that synthetic insulin had been added to the intravenous nutrition bags of 2 infants who survived their collapses. The insulin evidence functioned as the trial's smoking gun. Because administering synthetic insulin requires specific access and knowledge, the prosecution argued it was impossible for the poisoning to have been accidental. By ruling out all natural explanations for these specific drops in vital signs, the medical testimony established deliberate sabotage as the only scientific reality presented to the jury. The defense's countermodel begins by reevaluating the behavioral evidence used to build a serial killer profile. They argue the handwritten notes were not admissions of guilt, but rather the distressed stream of consciousness diary entries of a woman whose mental state was deteriorating under the pressure of a homicide investigation. The defense highlights that the same papers included phrases like "I did nothing," which were largely overshadowed by the prosecution's focus on the incriminating sentences. They similarly frame the social media searches and hoarded notes as administrative disorganization and standard curiosity for a nurse managing long-term patients, not the trophy collection of a murderer. If these behaviors are the artifacts of a stressed professional rather than a killer, the entire weight of the conviction shifts back to the technical integrity of the medical data. Professor Nina Modi and an international panel of neonatologists offer an entirely different medical framework for why these infants collapsed. This infographic shows the operational limits of a Level 2 neonatal unit. The Countess of Chester lacked the specialized equipment and staffing for high-acuity cases. The panel asserts that several infants were so fragile that their needs were exceeding the unit's capacity. Under these conditions, the panel concludes that sudden physiological deteriorations are a natural and expected consequence of systemic limitations, not evidence of murder. The panel also challenges the technical reliability of the smoking gun insulin evidence. The blood tests used to claim synthetic insulin poisoning are known to produce false results under physiological stress. Organic chemical markers can falsely trigger a positive reading for synthetic insulin on a standard assay. These tests were designed for rapid clinical screening to guide immediate treatment. The appellate argument is that they are not rigorous enough for criminal forensics and should never have been used as definitive proof of a crime. If the collapses were natural consequences of systemic failures and the insulin tests were false positives, the statistical clustering on the shift roster becomes a tragic coincidence. A critical procedural detail of the original trial is that the defense called 0 medical experts to the stand. This left Dr. Evans's theories scientifically untested in front of the jury. While appellate experts push for a retrial, the police maintain the conviction is sound. Investigators are currently looking into at least a dozen more suspicious incidents that occurred during Letby's nursing career. The case presents a stark binary. Either Lucy Letby is a sadistic monster who exploited medical obscurity to kill, or she is the victim of a systemic miscarriage of justice. This raises a difficult question for the legal system. How can a jury of laypeople accurately determine guilt when top-tier medical professionals are in total disagreement over the physical evidence? The Letby case has expanded far beyond the actions of a single nurse. It functions as a stress test of the criminal justice system's ability to weigh complex circumstantial science when the stakes are absolute.